you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's good to be in the studio with you today. And many hospitals in the rural area have been. Good afternoon, and welcome to Newsbreak. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the deep, deep South. You know it's Mississippi, and we have a horrid history. However, it's home, and that's why I'm here. We're broadcasting in over 139 countries. We're being seen on YouTube, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, where we're going to archive all of the events and all of the shows for generations to come. So one day when your grandchildren are watching We Believe Digital, they will be able to see what the struggle was like for those of us back in 2022. You know, Mississippi is a small state in comparison, not land-wise, but population. We have less than 3 million people in the state of Mississippi. Over 50% of the population in Mississippi is brown, black and brown. We have the most elected officials, African-American elected officials of any other state. African Americans run our municipality, the capital, Jackson, Mississippi, where we have an African American mayor and 5 out of 7 African American council people. Our school board is run by African Americans. Our county has all African American supervisors on the board, all 5. Our airport authority is run by African Americans. We have over $1 billion in revenue that flows through the leadership and through the hands of African Americans. And yet, the quality of life for African Americans continues to deteriorate. Over 42% of Jackson's population lives below the poverty line. Black businesses get less than 5% of contracts for goods and services in an 85% black city. We can do better. Martin Luther King and Malcolm and Medgar and Vernon Damer gave their lives so that we could improve the quality of life in our community. I'm afraid that my children will not even enjoy the standings that I have in their lifetime. We're losing a lot of land. We've lost all of our businesses. We're in trouble in Jackson, Mississippi. And the only thing that's going to be able to turn that around is effective leadership. And that leadership will not come from inside. It's hard to rise up in your hometown and succeed. And so I'm blessed to have with me today my co-host that's here, that migrated down here from Virginia and has hit the ground running. And his passion for social justice and inclusion is greater than mine. His energy level is unmatched. I'm talking about my friend, Chris Young. It's good to have you in the studio, sir.
Glad to be here, Mr. Garrett. It's always a pleasure.
Well, we're going to jump right into it. You heard my lead in. Jackson is in trouble, Chris. And I believe that the story of Richard's disposal embodies what's wrong in Jackson. Can you give our viewers all over the world what is going on with the Richard's disposal contract?
Well, it's a it's a lot going on, and there's been some recent developments. But in essence, after numerous attempts by the incumbent mayor to try to shake up the garbage contract, knowing intuitively, being a data-driven person, knowing that the city was being bilked by the incumbent trash collector that had been doing business here for 35 plus years, a multinational corporation. He decided to shake the tree and get RFPs out there, and there was numerous cycles of RFPs, and in every instance, the city council found ways to push back about that, and not the entire city council. We got to be sure to say that, but a trio of council members that just steadfast against anybody getting this contract other than the people that had it. And finally, a blind bidding process took place. Richards Disposal out of Louisiana was the low bidder by $1.2 million a year. And Mr. Garrett's already spoke of the financial economic conditions here in Jackson. $1.2 million is nothing to sneeze at down here, and a lot can be done with that money. But yet and still, that trio, especially that trio, and the current city council president voted against that contract. Well, the long and the short of it is the mayor put them to work anyway under emergency declaration. He put them to work anyway. He put an African-American company successfully hauling trash in New Orleans and Baton Rouge for decades now, put them to work on the Jackson streets April 1st. And it was rocky in the beginning, but things have smoothed out now. They're doing a fine job. I think some of the broadcast stations have to go look far and wide to find people to have those snickety kind of comments, but what I see day in, day out riding these streets is they're doing a fine job, and the city council decided not to pay them. So here they are now in their fourth month, and it seemed like the first bill for their first month was $808,000 roughly, and so now we're working on month 4, and they still haven't been paid. So the latest development, Mr. Garrett, and I'll wind up with this, is that the Richards Disposal has finally said, look, we can't do this. Enough is enough, and they filed suit against the city for failure to pay them. And so that's now just was filed 2 days ago. So we'll have to see how that turns out.
So there you have it. African American company was the low bidder by $1.2 million a year, over $12 million in a 10-year contract that the city could make it available for funding the police department, fixing potholes, do whatever. $12 million. And at the same time, I believe that we had an increase to raise the sanitation rates.
Yes.
At the same time, they declined the savings of $1.2 million a year.
That's right.
And Chris, I understood that some council people said things like, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, at a public town hall meeting, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And then the other one, cheaper is not always better, and an excuse. Well, not an excuse, but he's a council member that also added that now is not the time for uncertainty. So I don't know. I don't know what exactly that means, but it seemed to me like he was trying to find several points to justify his decision, which is an anti-black decision. It's an anti-black city decision. It's an anti-black economics decision that he made, and yet he raised his hand and said, "Let me serve, my black people of Jackson, Mississippi." But he's not doing that.
He's doing just the opposite.
Just the
of
opposite.
That. And Chris, it's obvious to our viewers out here that Chris is white, He's a gentleman that came down here and hit the ground running, and he's been working right alongside an organization called Working Together Jackson, that's led by mostly white pastors throughout the state of Mississippi and some African American pastors. It's not an all-white organization, but it certainly has a lot of white members. And they've been leading the charge for economic justice in our city. And Chris, I believe we met at the economic forum that they had.
That's right. That was last December out at New Horizon. And, I call myself, I think of myself as a friend of Working Together Jackson. I'm not a dues-paying member, but it seemed to me like this is the most energetic body active on the streets out here. And so that's why I try to pay close attention to what they're doing and be supportive in any way I can.
And they've organized their members and their pastors, and they've even put bodies in the courtroom at City Hall on the streets, trying to get these council people to do the right thing. Now, the irony of this, Chris, is that black people have turned on themselves. And so when I look at you, I'm reminded that, there's always been good white people that help in the struggle. I mean, you can go back to John Brown. You can go back to the formulation of the NAACP. So I think we're going to have some help from Working Together Jackson, from white clergy over there, from advocates like yourself that are going to have to get involved and try and turn this around. Because for some reason, Chris, the African-American leadership is so divided and has turned on itself until they have consistently elected a white president as the city council. Can you tell me what the last outcome of that vote was?
That was it's very surprising to me because for the last year we'd had, remember, there's 2 white council members on a body of 7, and last year there was one of those was female, and last year the white female was the city council president. Some say ceremonial post, but I mean, I think if you're the city council president, that you have a amazing influence within the city. You have the ability to have doors open for you. You can have a meeting with anybody you want at any time when you're the council president. But a little over a year ago, the council elected this white female as council president. She had been the council president before, 2 years previous to that, and representing Ward 7. But this time here, when it was time for a vote, there was someone that was nominated that had also Councilman Banks was also a previous council president. He was nominated, but apparently did not get the votes. And then a pivot was done, and a couple of council members, it's my understanding, it's Grizel, Dr. Grizel and Angelique Lee, pivoted around and nominated Ashby Foote, the only other white person on the council to be the president, and he got the votes.
A white Republican.
A white Republican in our democratic city now. So we have two white council presidents in a row out of a board of 7. And that's the first time I went back and researched. That's the first time that's happened in the last, I could get the data for the last 11 years. It never happened.
Explain this to me. Would that be akin to the U.S. Senate that is democratically controlled, selecting a Republican to be chairman?
That's exactly right.
Is it that crazy?
Yeah, it just doesn't add up.
You're looking at Newsbreak, and we're being brought to you by We Believe Digital. We're going to continue this conversation, but you can join our conversation by calling 800-492-5186. That's 800-492-5186. We've been broadcast over YouTube, over Facebook, over Roku TV, and on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. We're being seen in over 139 countries, and we want you to share your ideas and concepts with us. So give us a call, and we'll be right back after this break. Stay tuned.
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.DOT grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. By using Socrates Garrett ENT.com's crushed concrete products, anyone from homeowners to general contractors can help reduce landfilled concrete waste, conserve natural resources, and gain significant economic savings on materials and disposal costs. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
Wedding, milestone anniversary, or corporate event, 5-Star Lodge is the rustic elegance you need for your event space. With hardwood and stunning chandeliers, this is just the beginning of the 5-star treatment. Our on-site venue manager will ensure all details exceed your expectations. We offer a luxurious bridal lounge, beautiful reception hall, cabins, and an outdoor pavilion on the water. Visit 5stareventlodge.com to get started on your most memorable experience.
We're back. Glad you could join us here at We Believe Digital Broadcasting Studio. We're broadcasting live from Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, where we believe that the South will rise again because we have such a diversity in our state. 50% of Mississippi is brown or black. That's troubling to some. But it's our strength. If we could just get our elected officials, our statewide elected officials, and our House of Representatives and the Senate to understand that the strength of Mississippi is in its diversity, that we could be the entertainment capital of the world because all of the culture of African Americans emanated out of the South, out of Mississippi. When we think of the blues, it was born here in Mississippi. When we think of all of the African American accomplishments, John Johnson that came out of Laura, Mississippi, BET and came out of Mississippi. And we think about all that we have done, and we need to celebrate that diversity. This ought to be the tourism capital of the world because we have so much to show. Some of it not good, but it's our history. And instead of all Mississippians embracing that diversity, we still have people that just don't get it. We still have our governor who refuses to accept Medicaid expansion in Mississippi just because it was called Obamacare. In Mississippi, I want you to wake up, Mississippi. You see, we got to get rid of the hypocrisy. Chris, I believe Mississippi is in fact a welfare state.
It is.
And when I say that, what do I mean by that?
Well, there's a indebtedness. The Mississippi is a debtor state, the third highest debtor state in the country. So we're always taking in far more money from the federal government than we paying to the federal government. So that's where you're coming up with that. And
so I believe that we send $1 to Washington
and get 3 and change back.
3 and change back.
Yeah, just overall.
We send $1 to Washington. Yeah. We get 3 and change back.
Right.
That makes us a welfare state.
Third highest in the country.
Third highest in the country.
Despite the space activities on the Gulf Coast, Oxford, all these universities, all these famous locations, the Freedom Trail markers, the Blues Trail, and despite all the wonderful things, the successful base sports teams and all, despite all that, everybody wants to pretend that it's a level playing field, but it's not. Mississippi gets far more money back from the federal government than the majority of states.
And so, Chris, I believe that the Medicaid expansion, that Mississippi would receive a tremendous benefit from the federal government if it accepted that. What are the dollar numbers on that?
$5.84. $5.84 per $1.
We spend $1. We don't have to even send it anywhere. We spend $1.
We spend it, right.
And the federal government reimburses us at the rate of $5 and
$5.84.
$5.84 per dollar. And so and we refuse that.
Refuse that.
Yeah. Explain that to me.
Well, it's hard to explain. I wish I could explain that. I don't understand it, because the other thing about Mississippi, it's a unique feature about Mississippi, the most church attending state in the United States of America. So in that category, Mississippi is number one. No state attends church services more than Mississippi does. And so you'd think that there'd be a heart for the least of these, which, by the way, are not all black. If that's the assumption that people want to make, it's a faulty assumption. There's plenty of white people in that mix also. But they want to stave off that Medicaid because they want to view that like you're not having to work for it or something like that.
Wow.
It's bizarre.
And so, Chris, I believe that if you were to take the TANF dollars and the federal aid dollars away from Mississippi, Title I that comes into our school systems, et cetera, if you would remove all of that subsidy, I believe Mississippi would bankrupt within 30 days.
Yeah, and now they've got this new tax plan that's beginning to kick in. We won't see the impact till next year, but starting to offer tax breaks. It's to me a backward way of looking at things.
And so our purpose here is to try to shed some light on the minds and the hearts of those individuals that are in power in Mississippi. To our governor and our lieutenant governor and our speaker of the House, and to our municipalities, the diversity and the inclusion is the way forward, is the strategy that we ought to deploy.
Yes.
You see, Chris, I see people begin to get it, the power of buying local. So you will see the slogan, made in Mississippi. You'll see the slogan, buy local. But Chris, you will never see the slogan from Mississippi that says, buy black. Buy from blacks in Mississippi. We got to raise the bottom of Mississippi up so that we can lift the entire state up. We can't seem to get them to understand the gravity and the importance of dealing with the suffering, the least of us, in order to move the best of us higher.
And it's hard to tell. Sometimes I just think it's just ignorance, and then other times I think it's more of a willful, like the cunning as a fox type of thing. Sometimes I think it's very deliberate and willful, and other times I think they're just ignorant.
But it cripples the entire state. It keeps us last in every economic category. We were last in health care. We highest in obesity. We were the poorest state in the nation. We got all the bad numbers, Chris.
Right.
So obviously then something's got to change.
Yeah. Yeah, but apparently for those people, they're doing quite well themselves personally. So maybe, I don't know, maybe they really don't care about love thy neighbor.
Well, I can't see that in that we continue to talk about the brain drain that's occurring in Mississippi.
Right.
All of our children are leaving here as fast as they can get out. Now, we have older people that are migrating back to Mississippi that have retired in the north and the east, because of the climate, because of, the lower population rates. And Mississippi is ideally situated between I-20 and I-55, running east and west and north and south. And Pearl River flows down through the center of our city. And we ought to be the interstate commerce capital of the world, with 200 miles from Memphis, 200 miles from Birmingham, 200 miles from Shreveport, 200 miles from Mobile, Alabama. We ought to be a hub. And the only thing that's stopping Mississippi is poor, misinformed leadership on both sides, on the black side and on the white side. That's the only thing stopping us, Chris.
I know the governor and the lieutenant governor and the Speaker of the House. You know, I read their websites and the things that they put out and all, and they talk, some, not all three, but talk about inclusion, talk about participation, talk about, governing for all of Mississippi. But what I see day in and day out coming out of that Capitol building does not reflect that at all.
It doesn't reflect it out of the Capitol building, and it doesn't reflect it in our population. When we're speaking to the citizens of the state of Mississippi, we got to change. We had an opportunity to elect Mike Espy to the Senate, one of the more qualified individuals that Mississippi has birthed, that rose to a position as the Secretary of Agriculture. The Secretary of Agriculture. And came home to Mississippi, and he offered himself up to run for the Senate, and he could not get elected because our white population chose a individual that did not nearly have his pedigree, his work ethics, and his resume for that job. It's purely on racial lines.
That's right. That's right.
And if we operate on racial lines, Chris, we're going to be last. Even Bear Bryant, the coach of Alabama, 40 years ago recognized the fact that he could not compete in football in the U.S. with an all-white team. And we see that 5 blacks started at Ole Miss and at Mississippi State. And yet we cannot grasp the fact that we need to do that in economic justice. That blacks ought to have contracts equal to their percentage of the population, ought to share in the wealth. Chris, tell me how you're going to get this message across to our brothers.
Well, one thing, I noticed this state auditor, and, there's a lot of things being said about this gentleman. But I saw an article that he talked about how Jackson, we cannot give up on Jackson, and we've got to continue to push this ball down the road because Jackson is the biggest hub of tourism and commercial activity in the state. And so he's advocating in this report for a more vibrant Jackson. Well, so we have a city that's 85% black. So if you say that we need to create more economics, then you better be in the business of creating black economics. So I've invited Mr. White to the studio to sit in with us and talk about some of these issues so we can get down to what's really going on. His staff had returned my contact and said that really busy. And you know what he said they're busy on right now? Doing part 2 of this study that says we need to do more with Jackson. We must lift Jackson up. We're in bad trouble if Jackson continues to fail. So that first report was so eye-opening for a lot of people. Now they're going back for a deeper dive on part 2. And but he promised to join us in a couple of months.
Great. Well, let me just say to the auditor and say to our state leaders out there, it's not rocket science. Mayor Harvey Johnson said that if you're really concerned about Jackson, why don't we have a regional sales tax? Why should you do that? Because you've taken all your business out of Jackson. There are nowhere for Jacksonians to shop. All of the malls, major malls, are in Ridgeland, Madison County, or Rankin County. Nothing's in Jackson anymore. So our people have to travel over there to buy things. Mm-hmm. Well, why don't we share in the sales tax?
Sure.
Why don't the state institute a regional sales tax that would help solve the issues of poverty and allow Jackson to fix its water problems, its streets, its infrastructure? Simple little things like that could be done, Chris.
Could be done.
And Chris, it's got to be the greatest indictment of all times when we're fussing at the white folk in Mississippi right now for not doing the right thing. But it's got to be the greatest indictment of all times when you are an African-American city that's controlled by African-Americans and you fail to improve the quality of life for black folk in your city. Mm-hmm. To where you, in fact, deny an African-American firm that was a low bidder on a garbage contract with $1.2 million savings, you deny them the opportunity just to pick up garbage.
Yeah. All those employees, they're not coming from Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Those are going to be local workers. They are local workers making wages and putting that money back into our community.
Well, Chris, our time is about out. And so once again, this is Socrates Garrett and Chris Young coming to you from We Believe Digital Broadcast Studio. We want to send a special shout out to our visitor and our guest, Joni, that's in the studio with us today. And I want to say to her mom back in New Jersey, when she gets a chance to look at this, I'm sure Joni will put it up when she gets home, that we thank the world for her and glad that she's in our city, and we hope that you're doing well there in New Jersey. I want you to stay blessed, and you guys join us again next week. Have a great weekend and good evening.